3:12 a.m. Strait of Hormuz, eastern approach, 17 nautical miles southwest of Qeshm Island. An Iranian Hawk surface-to-air missile battery just locked its fire control radar onto USS Cole. Not a passive track, not a scan. A full weapons-grade illumination lock. The specific radar mode that feeds precision targeting data directly into a missile's guidance system and initiates the pre-launch sequence. The AN/ALQ-99 equivalent on the Cole's electronic warfare suite identified the emission type in 6 seconds and confirmed it in 4 more. 10 seconds total. Then the alarm. Then the voice of electronic warfare technician First Class Jordan Malik on the ship's internal circuit, calm and exact in the way that years of training produces. Fire control lock. Bearing 014. Iranian Hawk battery. Classification confirmed. The Cole's commanding officer, Commander David Park, had been awake for less than 3 minutes. He had been called to the bridge for what the watch officer described as an unusual radar contact. He had his coffee in his hand when Malik's voice came through the speaker. He put the coffee down on the chart table. He never touched it again that morning. Welcome to Navy Combat USA. This is the night an Iranian surface-to-air missile battery held a fire control lock on a United States Navy destroyer for 9 minutes and 44 seconds. And the air response that changed the tactical picture before that clock ran out. The Hawk missile system has a history that most people don't expect when they hear it associated with Iran. The MIM-23 Hawk, homing all-the-way killer, was supplied to Iran by the United States during the 1970s, when the Shah's government was a principal American partner in the region. After 1979, the revolutionary government kept the systems operational, reverse-engineered components, and maintained the batteries as a core element of Iran's layered air defense network. Decades later, Iranian-operated Hawk batteries represent a threat to U.S. aircraft and vessels that originated from American technology transferred to a government that no longer exists and was replaced by one that now points those weapons at the ships of the country that sold them. The Qeshm Island Hawk battery had been operational and continuously monitored by American intelligence for 11 years. Its radar emissions were cataloged. Its crew rotation patterns were documented through imagery. Its operational readiness had been assessed as high in the most recent intelligence cycle. High operational readiness, fire control lock, 9 minutes and 44 seconds. The context mattered for what came next. USS Cole was transiting the eastern approach to the Strait of Hormuz as the westbound component of a freedom of navigation operation that Fifth Fleet conducted on a rotating basis. The transit kept the legal principle of innocent passage through international waters operationally maintained, not just claimed, but physically demonstrated, ship by ship, transit by transit. The Cole had entered the eastern approach at 2:44 a.m., 28 minutes before the lock. The night watch had been quiet. 3 commercial vessels in the traffic separation scheme all tracked and identified. Iranian surveillance radar active on Qeshm Island. Normal, expected, logged as routine. The Cole's electronic warfare suite maintained passive collection throughout the approach. The Qeshm battery's surveillance radar had been active since the ship entered detection range at approximately 2:51 a.m. 13 minutes of being watched before the emission changed from surveillance to fire control. 13 minutes. The transition was detected immediately. Electronic warfare suites on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are among the most sensitive passive collection systems deployed on any surface combatant in the world. The Qeshm battery's fire control radar had a specific emission signature: pulse repetition frequency, scan rate, frequency band that the Cole's system matched against its threat library in under 10 seconds. Confirmed, Hawk fire control radar, active, locked. Commander Park arrived on the bridge at 3:13 a.m., 1 minute after the lock was confirmed. He received the brief from the officer of the deck in 40 seconds and moved to the Combat Information Center. The situation was clear. An Iranian air defense battery with a valid surface engagement capability had locked its fire control radar onto an American warship in international waters. The system was live. The lock was stable. The battery had not yet elevated a launcher or initiated a pre-launch sequence beyond the radar activation, but the lock itself was a weapons-grade action under the Cole's rules of engagement. Park had a decision to make and not much time to make it. He also had a problem that made the decision harder. The Hawk missile battery on Keshem Island is an air defense system. It was designed and deployed to engage aircraft. But the MIM-23 Hawk, in its Iranian-modified configuration, has a demonstrated surface engagement capability against large, slow targets at close range. The Cole, at 17 nautical miles from the battery position, was within the modified system's surface engagement envelope as assessed by Fifth Fleet intelligence, which meant the lock was not a mistake. It was not a system pointed at the ship for want of a better target. It was a choice. The Iranian battery crew had looked at an American destroyer transiting the eastern approach and chosen to engage its fire control radar in surface engagement mode. Why? 3 possibilities existed, and Park had to assign a probability to each one in real time. The first, a test. Iran periodically probes American reaction thresholds with controlled provocations designed to produce response data without triggering a kinetic exchange. A fire control lock that stops short of launch generates intelligence about American response times, electronic countermeasures activation, communications patterns, and command decision timelines. Valuable data. Collectible at low cost if the Americans don't shoot. The second, an escalation signal. Iranian military doctrine includes the use of controlled provocations to communicate political messages without formal diplomatic channels. A Hawk lock on an American destroyer during a period of elevated regional tension is a message. We have weapons trained on your ships, and we can pull the trigger at a time of our choosing. The third, preparation for a launch that something, a change in orders, a technical issue, a last-second stand-down by the battery commander, had interrupted before it executed. Park could not determine which of these was correct. He had to respond as though any of them could be. At 3:14 a.m., 2 minutes after the lock was confirmed, Park transmitted a flash contact report to Fifth Fleet. At 3:14 a.m. and 40 seconds, he activated the Cole's AN/SLQ 32 electronic warfare suite to active jamming mode, targeting the Hawk battery's fire control radar frequency. The jamming was not designed to destroy the battery's radar. It was designed to degrade the quality of the targeting data the radar was producing, introducing enough noise into the fire control solution to reduce confidence in the shot. A missile fired on a degraded solution has a lower probability of kill. A battery commander aware that his solution is being jammed has less certainty about the shot he's about to take. Less certainty introduces hesitation. Hesitation buys time. At 3:15 a.m., Park placed the Cole's SM-2 vertical launch cells in pre-launch warm-up and directed his gunnery officer to have firing solutions ready on the battery position. The SM-2 is not an ideal weapon against a ground-based radar installation. It is designed for air and surface targets, but an SM-2 launched at the Keshem battery position would arrive at the island's coordinates in approximately 90 seconds and detonate in the vicinity of the radar installation with sufficient force to suppress it, if not destroy it. Suppress, not destroy? But suppress was enough if launch was imminent. Park also transmitted directly to the battery on the Iranian military maritime emergency channel. The frequency both sides monitored for exactly these moments. Iranian installation on Keshem Island, bearing 014 from USS Cole. You are maintaining a fire control radar lock on a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. This is a hostile act under international maritime law. Stand down your fire control radar immediately. He broadcast the message twice. The lock held. At 5th Fleet Headquarters in Bahrain, the flash report from Cole had arrived at 3:14 a.m. and 44 seconds. Rear Admiral James Holloway was already at his command center. A separate incident in the Strait's western approach had kept him at his desk since 2:30 a.m. He read the Cole's transmission while the previous situation was still being managed. 2 simultaneous incidents in the Strait. He looked at his air asset board. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA 115 were on Alert 5 at NAS Bahrain, 94 nautical miles from the Cole's position, 5 minutes to launch, 14 minutes transit at best speed. He ordered the scramble at 3:15 a.m., 1 minute after the flash report arrived. He also directed USS Bulkley, operating in the Gulf of Oman, 38 nautical miles east of the Cole, to proceed west at best speed and enter the approach corridor to provide a second SM-2 battery. Bulkley was 38 miles away at 28 knots, 81 minutes. Bulkley was not going to help in the next 9 minutes. The FA-18Es were the play. At 3:19 a.m., 7 minutes after the initial lock, the Keshem battery did something that the Cole's electronic warfare suite had not seen in any of its previous encounter logs. It activated a second radar, not the Hawk fire control radar that was already locked on the Cole. A different emission, identified by Malik in 18 seconds as an Iranian TPS-43 surveillance radar, activated on a bearing that placed its coverage sector to the north and east of the Cole's position. The TPS-43 was not locked on the Cole. It was scanning the airspace. The Iranian battery had detected, or anticipated, inbound aircraft. The second radar activation was an air search. The battery was looking north, toward Bahrain, toward the bearing from which F/A-18ES launched from NAS Bahrain would approach, which meant the battery knew or expected that American aircraft were coming, and it was preparing to engage them as they arrived. This changed Park's calculation completely. The lock on the Cole now had a specific operational context. The Iranian battery was not just probing the destroyer, it was using the Cole as bait, maintaining a lock that would force the Americans to respond with aircraft, while positioning its air search radar to track and potentially engage those aircraft as they entered the area. The Hawk missile, in its improved Hawk configuration, has an effective engagement range of approximately 40 kilometers against aerial targets. Aircraft approaching from NAS Bahrain on the most direct route to the Cole's position would enter that engagement envelope at approximately the same moment the F/A-18Es would begin to be useful to the Cole. Useful and targetable simultaneously. Park transmitted this assessment to 5th Fleet in a flash update at 3:20 a.m. Holloway received it at 3:20 a.m. and 31 seconds. He redirected the FA-18Es immediately. Instead of a direct approach from the north, they were rerouted to approach from the southeast, over the Gulf of Oman, below the Keshem battery's radar horizon for as long as possible, using terrain masking from the Musandam Peninsula to stay below the TPS-43's coverage until they were inside the battery's blind sector. The rerouting added 4 minutes to the transit. It potentially saved 2 fighter pilots. At 3:21 a.m., 9 minutes and 44 seconds after the initial lock, the Hawk battery's fire control radar went offline. Not a stand-down. The emission did not transition back to surveillance mode. It simply stopped. Complete emission cessation? Malik reported it in a flat voice. Fire control radar offline. No emission. Battery status unknown. Unknown meant 2 possibilities. The battery had voluntarily deactivated. A stand-down in response to the Cole's jamming. The SM-2 warm-up. The warning transmission. Or an order from higher command. Or the battery had been moved. Mobile systems can relocate while maintaining their operational status. An Iranian battery that went offline could be repositioning for a new engagement angle. Park ordered continuous passive monitoring on all Iranian emission frequencies and maintained the SM-2 pre-launch warm-up status. He did not stand down. Correct decision. B. At 3:24 a.m., the TPS-43 air search radar on Qeshm Island went offline as well. Both radars offline simultaneously. The electronic warfare picture on the Cole's display went from active Iranian emissions to clean. Just the commercial and civilian signals that populated the Strait's electromagnetic environment at 3 in the morning. At 3:27 a.m., the two FA-18Es from VFA 115 entered the airspace south of Qeshm Island at low altitude on their rerouted approach. They climbed to 5,000 feet as they crossed the eastern approach channel. Nothing engaged them. The Hawk battery's radars remained offline. They established a combat air patrol orbit over the Cole's position and began systematic overflights of the Qeshm Island battery site at low altitude with their targeting pods active. What the targeting pods showed, transmitted back to the Cole and to 5th Fleet via data link, was a battery site in stand-down configuration. Launcher arms horizontal. Radar antennas in the stowed position. Vehicles present but stationary. The battery had not moved. It had stood down. Why? The intelligence assessment compiled at 5th Fleet over the following 4 hours could not determine the decisive factor with confidence. 3 variables had changed simultaneously in the 2 minutes before the stand-down. The Cole's jamming was degrading the fire control solution. The SM-2 pre-launch warm-up was visible to Iranian electronic intelligence systems as a weapons-ready posture, and the F/A-18Es, though rerouted, were identifiable as airborne from NAS Bahrain on Iranian radar tracking. Any one of those 3 variables could have been the stand-down trigger. All 3 together made the case for continuing to hold the lock extremely difficult to sustain for a rational Iranian battery commander. The Cole had presented a target that was simultaneously degrading his shot quality, preparing its own weapons for employment, and calling in air support that would arrive armed and authorized. The battery commander made a calculation. He stood down. So, the F/A-18Es remained on combat air patrol over the Cole's transit for 2 hours and 17 minutes, until the destroyer cleared the eastern approach channel and entered the open Persian Gulf at 5:39 a.m. The Qeshm battery's radars came back online at 4:11 a.m., 47 minutes after the stand-down. In surveillance mode, the battery watched the Cole for the rest of its transit without activating fire control mode again. The TPS-43 air search radar tracked the 2 Super Hornets the entire time they were airborne. Nobody fired, nobody launched, nobody escalated. But the battery had held a fire control lock on an American warship for 9 minutes and 44 seconds. And that fact did not disappear when the radar went offline. The after-action review produced findings that moved quickly through the 5th Fleet command structure. The first finding was the intelligence assessment gap regarding the Hawk battery's surface engagement capability modification. The modification had been assessed in a document that was 14 months old. In the intervening 14 months, Iran had conducted at least 2 field evaluations of modified Hawk systems in surface engagement mode, documented by National Intelligence Collection, but not reflected in the current threat assessment distributed to deployed ships. The tactical threat data the Cole had been operating against was outdated. The gap between intelligence collection and distributed threat assessment was identified as a systemic issue, affecting not just the Qeshm battery, but potentially other Iranian coastal defense systems in the Strait region. The review recommended a 60-day cycle maximum for threat assessment updates on all Iranian coastal defense systems in the Strait area. The previous update cycle was 180 days, 3 times the new recommended maximum. The second finding was the second radar activation, the TPS-43 air search radar that had indicated Iranian awareness of impending American air response. The review assessed that the battery had either detected the F/A-18E launch from NAS Bahrain through its own radar systems, or had received cueing from a separate Iranian intelligence collection asset tracking NAS Bahrain flight operations. Either scenario indicated that Iranian forces in the Strait had better situational awareness of American air operations than the previous threat assessment had assumed. The implication was direct. Future American aircraft responding to strait incidents needed to assume Iranian air defense systems were tracking them from the moment of launch, not from the moment of arrival. Every tactic built around the assumption of a surprise approach needed to be reassessed. The third finding addressed the stand-down trigger question. The review could not determine which of the three simultaneous pressure factors, jamming, SM-2 warm-up, or approaching aircraft, had been decisive in the Iranian battery commander's decision to stand down. But the review noted that all three had been applied simultaneously, and that the combination had worked. The finding was incorporated into tactical guidance as follows. In future fire control lock incidents, commanding officers should apply all available non-kinetic pressure measures simultaneously and maintain them continuously until stand-down is confirmed, rather than applying them sequentially. The Cole had done this instinctively. The guidance made it doctrine. Commander Park's post-incident report contained one passage that circulated beyond the immediate command structure and reached the desk of the Chief of Naval Operations. The passage read, in part, "The 9 minutes and 44 seconds during which Battery Kilo 4 maintained a fire control lock on USS Cole represented the longest documented continuous Hawk fire control lock against an American warship in the current operational period. During that time, the commanding officer and crew maintained weapons discipline, applied available countermeasures, and avoided escalation while preparing fully for a defensive kinetic response had launch occurred. The crew performed correctly. The outcome was favorable. What this incident demonstrates is that the margin between a fire control lock and a launch is a margin that exists in the mind of an Iranian battery commander operating under his own rules of engagement and his own command authority. We do not control that margin. We influence it. On this morning, the influence was sufficient. It may not always be. The Chief of Naval Operations read the passage twice. He forwarded it to the Secretary of Defense with a single line of annotation. The annotation said, "This is what the strait looks like at 0312 on a Tuesday morning." USS Cole completed its transit and arrived at its operating area in the Persian Gulf at 6:15 a.m. The crew stood down from battle stations. The electronic warfare suite returned to passive collection mode. The SM-2 cells went back to standard readiness. Electronic warfare technician, First Class Jordan Malik, filed his equipment employment report, noting the precise timing of every Iranian emission, every American countermeasure activation, and the exact moment each Iranian radar went offline. The report was 41 pages. The Keshem Island Hawk battery was imaged by American satellite collection at 9 a.m. The battery was fully operational. Radars stowed. Launchers horizontal. Crews at the site. Ready? At 11:30 a.m., a commercial vessel, a Maltese-flagged tanker, carrying crude oil from Basra to Rotterdam, transited the eastern approach channel at 12 nautical miles from Keshem Island. The fire control radar stayed in standby. The tanker captain never knew it was there. That is the Strait of Hormuz at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning. The weapons are real. The capability is real. The margin is managed, not eliminated. And somewhere in the operations center at Keshem Island, a log entry recorded the Cole's jamming signature, the SM-2 warm-up timing, the FA-18E approach profile. They were building a better picture. They are always building a better picture. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.